Hello, and thank you for calling Paragus Strategic IT.
We've lost track of the amount of times someone has said, "That's an interesting idea, but you'll never make it happen." If we'd listened to them, Paragus wouldn't exist today. We're here because we don't let anyone tell us what we can dream or what we can do. Tell us we're nuts, and we'll probably do it anyway. Tell us it's impossible, and you can guarantee we'll do it. As companies get bigger, a lot of them get more conservative and buttoned up. They lose track of what made them unique and successful in the first place. At Paragus, our growth has always been fueled by the long shot, by the big idea, by not playing it safe, by doing the things that everyone says can't be done. And we have no plans on changing.
God bless America. Ah! Only in America. And God bless Paragus IT.
All right. Well, I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. Thank you all for being here. We've got a very large audience, so I want to be respectful of time and kind of jump right into the main topic at hand. Just give me 1 sec to reshare my screen and we will jump into it. Right. All right. Can everybody see my screen okay? Yep. Perfect. Thank you very much. So let's go ahead and get started. I know there's gonna be more people jumping in. The call is recorded, so we will share out the recording afterwards, but we've got a lot to talk about. So just real quick background on who Paragus IT is, for those of you who are not as familiar with the company. We've been around for about 20 years. We employ about 65 employees, or partners as we call them, because we are an employee-owned firm. We are located in both central and western Massachusetts, and we serve about 145 small and medium-sized businesses in western and central Mass. And our core purpose, as we like to say, is this idea of making IT fun. This is a great example in today's topic where AI has a lot of different perspectives and opinions and ways you can look at it. And we're really trying to look for the silver lining and see the fun in it. Because I think it is a tremendous opportunity, and hopefully that's what you'll come away with today. The last thing I'll say about Paragus is our company is broken into 5 distinct departments. We have what we call the 4 pillars of IT, so providing on-demand help desk support, our security and compliance team, our strategic planning folks, our business automation specialists, and our projects department, which serves as the foundation. All right, so let's talk about why we're all here today. AI is being hyped to an absolutely epic level. I'm sure all of you who are on this call have seen emails and phone calls, and it's all over the news. It's all over social media. AI has really just taken off. But that hype is warranted. What is happening right now in the AI space is really significant, and it is going to matter. This is going to change the way that we think, the way that we work, the way that we act, and even the way that we learn. So that said, I want to set your expectations for today's call. You are likely going to leave this presentation with more questions than answers. And I apologize for that, because that's not typically how we approach these presentations. However, in this particular case, it's actually the questions that matter more than the answers. My goal for today is to try to catch you up on what is going on, try and give you a sense of where this might be going, and then hopefully leave you with some next steps that you can take so that you can help to understand how to navigate this somewhat confusing but certainly exciting space. So sit back, buckle up, and let's get the show on the road. Before we dive in, I want to give you just a little bit of a history lesson. AI as a concept is actually 67 years old. It was first introduced at a conference at Dartmouth College in 1956. Then in 1965, the first deep learning-like algorithm was introduced. So this has been understood at a conceptual level for a very long time. This isn't new in any way. However, what a lot of you are trying to understand is, well, if that's the case, why are we talking about it so much? Why has it become a really, really important topic just in the last 12 months? So there's 4 reasons that I'm going to walk you through that I think are the major contributors to why this is suddenly dominating a lot of our attention and focus, and something that we're all paying very, very close attention to. The first has to do with computational power. Many of you have probably heard of Moore's law, which stated that the number of transistors that could be integrated into a circuit would double approximately every 2 years. After 50 years and counting, Moore's law has held true, way beyond the time that many people thought it could even be possible. That is a significant component to what's going on with AI. It's great for these things to be true in theory, but without the computational power to make the theory a reality, then they live in theory. But what we're seeing is we are reaching the point where we have the computational power to put into practice these things that previously only existed in textbooks. The second reason has to do with the amount of global data that exists. Since about the year 2000, we have started seeing the same doubling every 2 years that occurs in Moore's law happening in the amount of data being created on a yearly basis. To put that into perspective, when describing amounts of data, we didn't even need the prefix exa until 1975. Why? Because up until 1986, every bit of information created by humans, every spoken word, written word, radio, TV, everything that existed would have fit on somewhere between 2.6 and 5 exabytes. Now, compare that to 2020, where it's estimated that the world produced just over 64 zettabytes of digital data, or 1 billion terabytes, just in 2020. By 2025, we're expected to create 175 zettabytes of data per year. And according to an article in the magazine Nature, by 2030, the world will generate around a yottabyte of data each year. Now, this is usually where I like to pause and ask, is anyone having a hard time picturing what I'm talking about? I'm imagining that some of you are, and the reason is our brains are not designed to understand this kind of exponential thinking. Human beings are wired to think linearly. When we think about time, distance, growth, and other measurements, we tend to think in a very linear way. For example, if I asked each of you to stand up, walk to the front door of your building or home, and then imagine taking 30 linear paces, I suspect that most of you could predict with a great deal of accuracy where you would end up. However, if I asked you to do the same thing, but this time, instead of taking 30 linear steps, I asked you to imagine taking 30 exponential steps. That simply means doubling the number of steps each time. In other words, you would take 1 step, then you would take 2, then you would take 4, then you would take 8, until you had done that in total of 30 times. Now, I want you to think for a moment. Try to predict where you think you would end up if you took 30 exponential steps. Would you be in the next town? Would you be in the next state? Would you be in the next country? Well, I don't know what you guys came up with, but the actual answer is it turns out you would end up traveling a little over 1 billion meters, which, put another way, means going around the Earth 26 times. So, as probably most of you just experienced, our brains aren't wired to think exponentially. When it comes to things like computing power and the amount of data that we're generating, which are both happening at an exponential rate, it becomes hard for us to fully process and understand the gravity of what we're talking about. Which brings me to reason number 3 that AI is taking off right now. The cost to train AI has gone down 99.5% just in the last 5 years. This cost decline is primarily driven, of course, by the increase in computing power and the growth of data. But what this means is that far more businesses, researchers, startups, entrepreneurs can now afford to build their own AI models and tools. Which, of course, brings us to the 4th and final reason. There was $160 billion invested in AI in 2021 alone. And it's estimated that by 2030, the AI market will reach $1.6 trillion. So when you factor all 4 of those things together, it starts to get you wondering, where is this going? Where is all this AI being used? We're talking about a pretty significant amount of growth and investment in industry. Where is all of this showing up outside of just the few things like ChatGPT that have made headlines? It's going everywhere. And that is partly why this conversation today is so important. This is not a limited technology with a specific niche application. This has the potential to touch just about everything and change just about everything. We're talking about things like impacting the way medicine is delivered, the way research is conducted, the way students are trained, the way robotics are used, the way that aid is provided, the way that cars are driven, the way that companions are created. There really is a never-ending landscape that is being impacted by AI. And that's partly what I want to introduce you today. I certainly can't go through the entire spectrum, but I want to highlight a few examples of where AI has started showing up and what that early impact has been. But you don't need to take my word for it. Listen to Sundar, the CEO of Alphabet, which for those of you who don't know is Google. Artificial intelligence could have more profound implications for humanity than electricity or fire. If you really think about that for a second, that is quite a statement. And if you really understand kind of how the human evolution works and how our brains and our bodies are engineered, what you might know is that during both of these two events, when humans kind of mastered the art of both fire and electricity, we as a species evolved quite significantly. And the reason was, especially with fire, before we had fire, our bodies had to expend a great deal of energy processing food because our food wasn't cooked and otherwise it was going to kill us. We also had to spend a great deal of time and energy always worrying about things like warmth and food and stability, and we were traveling all the time. When we mastered how to create fire, we actually, as a species, evolved because our brains and our bodies were able to spend time and energy that was previously wasted on new activities. And this was true again when electricity really became mainstream and spread throughout the country. The prediction here is that AI has the potential to unlock the next level of human evolution. And the theory there is, at its true ultimate capacity, AI could have reduced the amount of time, energy, and thought that we're currently spending on many, many tasks thus freeing up that time, energy to be spent on something new that we have never, as a species, had the ability to spend it on before. Now, that is the most optimistic view of where this is headed. That is the utopian perspective. There is, of course, many other perspectives of where AI is headed, but I like to see the positive side, especially on a Friday afternoon. I want to make sure that we're not all doom and gloom today. A slightly more pessimistic perspective, or maybe just a more pointed perspective, was that of Peter Diamandis, the executive chairman of Singularity University, who said there will be two kinds of companies at the end of this decade: those who are fully utilizing AI and those who are out of business. And keep in mind that there is a specific point in time we're talking about. He's saying this decade, meaning in the next 6.5 years. And he's also saying fully utilizing, not experimenting with, not playing with, but fully utilizing AI. And while that may sound extreme, I would say that it is 100% accurate. Based on the research and the experience and the data that I've seen, I really think that this is absolutely a true statement, and why this topic is so important and why we're glad to have you all here today so we can explore it further. So I want to take a little bit of a step back and just take a look at where are we today? When it comes to AI, where is the world in June of 2023? So before I can do that, one thing that's important for you to understand are the different types of AI that are theoretically said to exist or could exist. And depending on who you're asked, you're going to hear this represented in either 3 models or 4 models. The 4 model version looks something like this. There's a reactive machine, there's what's called limited memory, there's theory of the mind, and then there's this idea of being self-aware. When you look at that in the 3-stage model, it looks more like this. Either way you slice it, though, there's a general agreement that today, what we have is at best this narrow AI, or sometimes called limited AI. This is stage 1 or stage 2, depending on which model you're looking at. And the idea is that it is capable of doing one thing really, really well. Maybe it can process language very efficiently. Maybe it can do a certain type of task very efficiently, but it is limited in the sense that it has a very specific training and a very specific focus. And within that, it's quite effective, but beyond that, it's almost laughable. The next major milestone will be general AI, sometimes referred to as theory of mind. That would mean that the AI is capable of what we think of as human level intelligence, meaning that it can have the same complexity and variety and diversity of thought as the human brain. We are not there yet, but this is the next major stage in the AI evolution. And then the final stage, which some will tell you is impossible, others will tell you is going to be here very soon. This is the most controversial, most theoretical version of AI, is stage 3, which is often called super AI. Sometimes it's called self-aware AI. The idea here is that you have AI that is truly more intelligent and more capable than the human being species. This would be an AI that could outthink us in practically every field, every application, everything that it is capable of doing. It can do it better than we can do it. So, putting aside the super AI for now, how far away are we from general AI? AI that is as smart as we are and as capable as we are. So, it depends on who you ask. On the one hand, you have someone like Ray Kurzweil, a brilliant computer scientist and futurist who has correctly predicted several other significant advancements in technology. And he states that general AI is going to arrive right around the end of this decade, that before we turn the clock to 2030, we will have reached a human level of intelligence within our AI applications. On the other end of the extreme, you've got somebody like Elon Musk, who's claiming that we're going to reach general AI, if not super AI, by the end of 2025. Now, he likes to make a lot of bold predictions. I personally would put a lot more stock in Ray's forecast, but either way you look at it, it's quite significant. We're talking about a very short amount of time for the world to change completely. And that's part of what is so disruptive about this movement, about this technology, is any other time that the entire world was upended or a significant technological advancement occurred, it happened over a long period of time. There was a lot of warning, a lot of time in terms of implementation. It didn't happen overnight. It certainly didn't happen within a decade. What makes this particular evolution so significant is the speed at which is it occurring. We are talking about within the next 6 years, reasonably, not just theoretically, but reasonably, we could predict that we will reach a human level of AI. That, for many, many decades, has just been a science fiction topic, something that we all thought was fun to watch a movie about, but didn't expect to actually experience. So that is significant, and that is something that we really do need to be paying attention to in context of everything else that's going on. However, even putting the future aside for a moment, where we are today is not insignificant. Let's take a look at a little bit of a deeper dive of where the world is in 2023, halfway through the year. So here's some recent headlines. ChatGPT passed the US medical licensing exam entirely on its own. ChatGPT also passed the bar exam, and ChatGPT passed the Wharton MBA final exam. As most of you probably know, Microsoft invested $10 billion into OpenAI, one of the most significant investments of its kind. And Microsoft has also incorporated ChatGPT into both Teams and Bing to make those tools significantly smarter than they have ever been. As a result, Google issued what's called a red alert, which is where they brought back the founders and called an executive-wide meeting and basically said there is a crisis. And the crisis is Microsoft beat them to search. Google's business is built on search. Search is everything to Google. If it does not have the fastest, best search engine in the market, it doesn't have a lot. And so when Microsoft beat them to the punch by launching Bing empowered by ChatGPT, they kind of freaked out, and they are now in the process of rushing the launch of Bard. Bard's had a little bit of a false start, partly because it was rushed to react to the announcement by Microsoft. But Bard is a very, very powerful technology, and you have not heard the last about it, in my opinion. I think this race is far from over, but it is definitely one that for the first time in a very long time, Google found itself chasing instead of leading. Some other kind of important headlines that you can pay attention to. ChatGPT kind of set a record for the fastest growth to 1 million users. But probably more importantly, it hit 100 million users in 2 months. So a little bit more about ChatGPT and its parent company, OpenAI. OpenAI was born to tackle the challenge of achieving artificial general intelligence. That's its mission. It wants to be the first company to reach general intelligence, which again is the level of artificial intelligence that's capable of being as intelligent as a human being, that middle grade. Now, the magnitude of this problem makes it arguably the single biggest scientific enterprise humanity has ever put its hand upon. This is more complicated than getting to the moon. This is more complicated than anything else humanity has achieved in the past. And despite all the advances in computer science and artificial intelligence, no one knows exactly how or when we are going to achieve this. ChatGPT-3 was the largest neural network ever created at the time. Its language expertise and innumerable capabilities were a surprise for most. And although some experts remain skeptical, large language models already felt strangely human. It was a huge leap forward for OpenAI researchers to reinforce their beliefs and convince us that artificial intelligence at a human level is capable and can be accomplished using a technology called deep learning. Today, we already have access to ChatGPT-4, which is 500 times larger than the language model that shocked the world last year. So to put that into perspective, this shows you what the likelihood of ChatGPT 3 versus 4 was in passing, which means at least a score of 80% or higher, one of these exams. And what you can see is ChatGPT was very good at some types of things, SAT math, AP art history, but where it struggled, ChatGPT 4 has really picked up the slack in a lot of significant areas. Now, you can also see, like AP English Literature, we still have a long way to go. But when it comes to, for example, the bar exam, where ChatGPT 3 was really struggling, ChatGPT 4 made an enormous improvement upon its ability to complete that exam. So what you're seeing here is a massive, massive impact in a very, very, very short amount of time. ChatGPT 5 is already in use by the OpenAI company. It's not publicly available yet, but it is coming soon. And shortly behind that will be ChatGPT 6. They've already kind of predicted that ChatGPT 8 will be out in the next 24 months. And if each one becomes 500 times more powerful than its predecessor, then you start to understand how some of the things that they're predicting could become possible. A couple other just really good practical examples. AI defeated the top doctors in China in a tumor diagnosis competition. So the way this worked was in a 2-round brain tumor diagnosis competition, AI was correct 87% of the time, and it took the AI about 15 minutes to diagnose 225 cases in the first round, while the doctors achieved 66% accuracy, and it took them 50 minutes. In the second round, AI made a correct prediction 83% of the time in just 3 minutes, and the doctors got a 63% accuracy rate, and it took them 20 minutes. So what you can see here is not only is the AI good, but it gets better and better and smarter each time at a pace that is far faster than our own human growth. So if it gets an 85 and then it learns from that, it's going to get a much higher score the next time. And humans will learn as well, but not nearly at the speed that the AI is capable of learning. Another good example, the secret to good programming might be to ignore everything we know about good programming, at least for AI. It seems preposterous, but DeepMind's new coding AI just trounced roughly 50% of human coders in a highly competitive programming competition. On the surface, the tasks sound relatively simple. Each coder was presented with a problem in everyday language, and the contestants needed to write a program to solve the task as fast as possible, and hopefully with as few errors as possible. But this is a behemoth of a challenge for AI. The AI needed to first understand the task, something that comes naturally to humans, and then to generate the code. Perhaps more importantly, though, AlphaCode paves the road for a novel way to design AI coders, forget past experience, and just listen to the data. So all of this put into kind of summary, there is many people out there predicting that there will not be human coders in less than 5 years from now. Now, whether it's actually true that all human coders go away or not, I don't think there's any debate that the number of human coders is going to start to decrease precipitously and probably very significantly. Another good example of some very powerful AI in the world is Microsoft released their new tool. And this tool called Vali says that it is capable of taking as little as 3 seconds of audio and then underlining or using that to underline a replica of your voice. Now, the tech behind this, which Microsoft refers to in a new paper on neural codec language model, is complex, but in practice, using the system appears to be wildly simple. You plug in an audio sample, then you type in some text, and voila, a real sounding speech of the text that you typed in. Now, of course, many text-to-speech apps already exist. Most news sites, us included, for example, offer like a machine-powered dictation services. Things like Siri, Alexa are very popular. But most existing speech-generating programs would require a large amount of input. And they also haven't exactly figured out how to make AI voices sound particularly human, mostly due to the fact that the emotional tone and tiny inflections are incredibly complex to convey. If Microsoft's system really can deliver on tone with that little amount of data input required, that's a really, really big deal. And obviously, there's a lot of mixed feelings here. While this does have some interesting, valuable applications, it also has a lot of very scary implications. You know, we're already hearing a lot about deep fakes, and that's become kind of a common vernacular now. If those deep fakes can be enhanced with really, really good sounding audio, then we start to create a scenario where it's going to become harder and harder to tell what's real, what's make-believe, what's trying to trick us, and what is actual. So there's a lot here that we should be paying attention to and listening to, especially from a cybersecurity perspective, which is obviously the vantage point that we're looking at it from. Kind of another interesting example, there was an AI-powered brain implant that can turn thoughts into text at 62 words a minute. Now, humans speak at about 160 words a minute, but this would allow somebody who is incapable of speech, either through some sort of disability or other impediment, to be able to communicate at 62 words a minute. Now, you compare that to the technology that Stephen Hawking was using, and he was texting at something like 3 to 4 words a minute. So this is enormously impactful. He was using eye movements to control a mouse to touch letters, whereas this would be a brain implant where you would think the word you want to say, and then it would say the word for you. And then maybe the one that concerns me the most, in some ways it's very exciting, but in some ways it's a little scary. There was a study conducted where they took an fMRI machine and used AI to train it, or patients to train an AI model using the fMRI machine. So the way the training worked is they would scan a person's brain while showing them an image, and the AI would pay attention to what the brain looked like when the person was looking at that image. Then they turned off the images, had the person think of the image, and had the AI try to create an image using an AI image generator of what it thought the person was thinking about. So these are the examples of the images that they were exposed to. And this is the AI generation of reading the person's brain and trying to create an image based on what it thinks the person is trying to picture. That's really, really interesting. It's also a little scary. The idea that if our brain waves or our brain activity was made accessible, that potentially a computer could interpret our thoughts without us even having to verbalize them. Really interesting stuff. A lot of really interesting applications, but also a little scary. Then, kind of the last piece of this puzzle I want to put together for you is part of what makes this really interesting is the intersection between AI and other technologies. And there's a lot of great examples. I mentioned earlier where AI and healthcare are intersecting is quite exciting. Where AI and research is intersecting is quite exciting. But one that I find just kind of maybe most relatable to a lot of us is where AI is intersecting with robotics. Robotics is, of course, advancing very significantly on its own. There's a ton of innovation happening there. And then when you overlay that with the innovation and the capability of AI, you start to see some pretty wild stuff. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what I mean. This first is a project called Atlas by Boston Dynamics. And this is a humanoid robot that is powered by AI. And so it has a brain on board. As you can see, it's not tethered to any wires. There's no cable running to it. So this thing is not only running on battery, but it's running on its own intelligence. And basically, what you're going to see here in this video is a construction worker in a simulation takes out his tablet and says, I need my toolbox. The robot is then awoken, looks around, finds the toolbox, and delivers it to the construction worker. Have a look. Oh, I apologize. I just want to make sure I've got the screen sharing set up for audio. Perfect. Okay. So according to Boston Dynamics, all of that were actions he decided to make on his own. So he chose his path to get up there. When I say he, the robot chose his path to get up there. The robot chose his path to get down. It decided it could flip over that box. And apparently it even decided to do that funny little flip and fist bump at the end that basically it learned from its human counterparts and from the data modeling that it has been built off of, some of those kind of more opportunities for creating some flair. But you can just imagine the capability of something like this in the workforce, monitoring as part of a police force, serving as a firefighter, aiding in a construction site, like in this model here. It's really easy to imagine the practicality and the use case, but also the concern around a robot like this out in the wild. So let me show you another example. Elon Musk, for those of you who have not been following this, has announced his project called Optimus. Now, you can say what you want about Tesla and Elon Musk and kind of the way he looks at things, but this is kind of his take on where he wants to see Optimus go.
Optimus Production Unit 1, which is the ability to move all the fingers independently, move to have the thumb have 2 degrees of freedom, so it has opposable thumbs, so it's able to operate tools and do useful things. Our goal is to make a useful humanoid robot as quickly as possible. Optimus is designed to be an extremely capable robot, but made in very high volume, probably ultimately millions of units, and it is expected to cost much less than a car. This means a future of abundance, a future where there is no poverty, where you can have whatever you want in terms of products and services.
So there's obviously a lot baked into that statement, and we don't need to unpack it. But the technology is impressive nonetheless. The idea that you could have a robot that costs a lot less than a vehicle, so let's just say $10,000 to $15,000, that you could own or lease or rent, that would live in your house and be part of your household and be able to do household-related tasks, running on entirely an artificial intelligence model. There's many other of these robots in the wild. These are just kind of 2 examples. A third and the final one I'm going to use today is this robot called Figure, which is a humanoid robot launched by Brett Adcock. And really the goal here is specifically to target physical labor. So this particular robot is designed not to be so much a home aid or a law enforcement agent or many of the other applications you've seen, but this is more of just doing physical labor within our economy. So his analysis is that 50% of the global GDP about $40 trillion a year, is manual physical labor. If this robot could do that, it could theoretically displace 85 million jobs by 2030. Now, again, there's a lot of ifs in that statement, but this is the level of disruption that we are dealing with, or at least that we need to be aware of. All right, I am sure at least some of you on this call are thinking, I'm just not ready for this. I'm already trying to solve too many other problems. There's enough other things going on in the world. I don't have the time, the energy, the money, or the resources needed to explore this topic. There's a temptation to just kind of put your head in the sand and this is going to be what it's going to be. But, you know, I don't need to worry about it. And I certainly don't need to do anything about it. While I totally get that perspective, here's the thing that's so important for you to take away from today's presentation. This is already here. I would venture to bet that in just about any company represented on this call today, AI is already being used in your company, whether you know it or even like it. It could be that brand new junior employee who seems to just be crushing it right out of the gate, or it could be the copywriter who suddenly seems to have a lot more time on their hands. Or maybe you've got an executive who just recently got about 10 times better at writing emails. In all likelihood, AI is already being used somewhere in your organization. And if it isn't today, it will be tomorrow. At a high level, I would submit to you that this is a good thing. A grassroots campaign sanctioned and supported by leadership can be a very effective and low-cost way to begin to explore what use cases exist within your business at what is still a relatively early stage of the development of AI. However, there do need to be some rails on your AI adoption in order to protect your business. And I think this is an area where a lot of businesses don't understand the risks of AI. And when you've got that new junior employee who's been using ChatGPT to do some of their work, while that might be great, and in many ways it is great, there is risk. And there do need to be rails. And that's what I want to make sure that you understand coming out of this call today. So, as some of you may have already heard, a Samsung employee unintentionally leaked some very proprietary code via ChatGPT early on in its release. Now, keep in mind, he certainly was not the only one to do this. This is happening literally all the time. But this instance became kind of the poster child and the example for what can go wrong when employees are not properly trained on when or how to use AI. Now, that doesn't mean you should ban AI. It just means that you need to understand how it works well enough to create some policies and do some training so that your staff are informed about when and how AI can be used in the workplace. Probably the most common potential risk is an organization has an employee who's using a tool like ChatGPT to help them perform some aspect of their job. And those are great examples. We have taken our commercial lease for our building and asked ChatGPT to review it for us. You can submit strategic plans and ask ChatGPT for input or feedback. You can ask it to read an email from a customer and help you write a response. There is a never-ending list of applications for a tool like ChatGPT in the workplace. However, here's the catch. Whatever you ask ChatGPT to look at is going into its data set. It learns by looking at information. The reason ChatGPT is so smart is it's constantly learning and growing, and it learns and grows by net new input, not just by its existing data set. It is a deep learning model, which means it's constantly evolving and growing and improving, which means when you feed it something, that information not only is going to be used to provide you an answer, but that information is going to be used to provide other people an answer. It becomes part of its intelligence. Think of it like a neighbor. If I go over to my neighbor and I ask them for some input or some advice on a really confidential situation at work, while I might get an answer that might be helpful, I have also now shared that information with my neighbor, who may or may not share it with somebody else. And that's the way you need to think of ChatGPT. It's a friendly, helpful neighbor who is trained in many, many aspects of the world and has a lot of advice and input and value to provide, but it's not the greatest at keeping secrets. So you have to be careful with what you share with ChatGPT. For example, if you want to share something that is highly proprietary, what you want to do is take out the proprietary information first. So maybe, for example, if you want to have it review a contract, make sure you remove all the names and people from the contract and then just have it review the language. If you want it to review a data set, make sure there's no customer names or addresses or anything that would be identifiable in that data set before you have it review it. As long as you're using AI carefully, it's a wildly valuable tool, but you do need to be careful about what you share with it. And this is probably the biggest risk to organizations right now. And I mean right now, because it is a small risk in the grand scheme of things. But in the immediate moment, the biggest priority we have for our business owners and our clients is make sure your staff know that if they're going to use AI, especially a tool like ChatGPT, that they're not plugging in anything that's confidential, protected, proprietary, because that data does become part of the data set and therefore is available to anybody else. So the question I'm hoping a lot of you are starting to ask yourself is, where do I go from here? And this is the question that we're getting most from our business owners, the executives, and the managers that we work with. Those of you who have accepted, all right, I can't put my head in the sand, I do need to pay attention to this, I need to at the least set some boundaries, and then beyond that, I need to figure out what our path and our journey is going to look like. Good, that's exactly what the question you should be asking. So what I'm telling you is that you do need to embrace this, but I'm not going to tell you exactly how. I'm also telling you that this can be dangerous, but I'm also saying you should do it anyway. And I'm telling you that this is going to change everything, but that I have no idea exactly how or when it's going to change. So what are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to navigate this? Here's my advice. What I would like you to leave this presentation with is just to start having your gears turning. I wanted to make sure you knew kind of where we are at, where we're headed, and then help to kickstart your AI journey so that you are starting to do the right work. My advice to you is that you should think of this like a journey. You may not know where you're going to end up, but you do need to start taking some steps and start moving. So how do you do that? What's the first step? The first thing I would do is take this seriously. This isn't the kind of thing you're going to be able to simply outsource to a vendor or delegate really far down your org chart. This is an executive level discussion, and it isn't a short one. This is an ongoing conversation that should become part of your meeting agendas, your corporate retreats, your strategy sessions. This is going to be a discussion, a conversation, an initiative that you're going to be looking at for the next 10 years. You want to make sure that this topic is getting consistent attention within your business. So whether you form a specific committee or task force, or you assign this responsibility to a key member of your team, the first step is to start spending time and resources looking at AI. Make it part of the conversation, and not a one-off conversation, but make it part of your ongoing routine conversation, the same as you would your finances, your operations, your customer service, your employee satisfaction. Your AI adoption and implementation needs to live at that level. From there, start asking a lot of questions. Where could AI help our business? Where could it hurt us? Where could AI speed up a process? Where could it give us an improvement on an outcome that we're trying to achieve? Where might it help us solve a problem or give us a competitive edge? Where might it give our competitors an edge? Where could AI be used to make another business more competitive with us? Keep asking those questions and ask everyone in your organization, not just your executive team. While this should be led by an executive team, it should be a company-wide conversation. Oftentimes, it's going to be some of your junior, newer employees, some of your line level employees who are going to have the best perspective about where the most mundane, repetitive, error-ridden work lives within your organization. Those people can work with you to figure out where are the opportunities. And that question should just be repeated over and over again. Where are the opportunities for us to use AI? From there, my advice is to look for a partner. Now, I know that I told you that you can't outsource this, and I stand by that, but that also doesn't mean that you need to do it entirely on your own. Internally, your team needs to be the one looking for the opportunities, thinking creatively about AI, and figuring out where it's going to help and how. That can't be outsourced. But once those opportunities have been identified, there's absolutely no reason that you need to figure this out entirely on your own. Look for partners who can help bring your vision into reality and do the heavy lifting once you've come up with a concept and the idea. And not that we are the only players in this space, but this is definitely a sandbox that we intend to play heavily in. A few years ago, we launched our automation and intelligence division of our company, and that division has now been expanded to be AI automation and intelligence. We are very passionate about working with business owners to figure out how can they take their ideas, their concepts, their opportunities for where automation, AI, and intelligence can be leveraged and help them find the way to actually implement that technology within their business. We won't be the right tool for every situation, but we have a lot of other relationships and connections. And our goal is to help either be the ones that can solve the problem or find somebody else who can. So if you are a client of Paragus or interested in becoming one, we're certainly happy to help. But there's a lot of other organizations out there who are going to be working with businesses, small and large, and hopefully also small, to start to solve some of these problems. But again, don't wait for the solutions to come to you. By that point, it's kind of already too late. You don't want to just be keeping up in this race. You do need to be setting your own pace, your own goals, your own objectives, and you want to be driving this bus, not sitting as a passenger on it. And with that, I'm going to end with just one funny little meme that I thought was hilarious that I encountered while I was doing my research for this presentation. And then I am going to open it up for questions. We've got about 8 minutes left in our time. I'm also happy to stick around a little bit longer. I'll open up the floor. Feel free to unmute and use your microphone or type in the chat. Either is totally fine. So somebody asked, what's a good application for a small business using AI? Obviously, that's going to depend a lot on what industry you're in. It's not going to be the same for every industry, but I'll tell you an example of one that we've started to see implement pretty commonly, which is using a chatbot to handle customer service. So if you've got a business where people are calling in asking questions about things like maybe an update on an order, or they want to see if this thing is ready yet, or they have a question about a product, if you have a team of people who are dealing with incoming questions, having to respond, maybe set appointments, maybe change appointments, those types of manual activities that are basically just exchanges between two human beings, chatbots can be a very powerful way to tackle that. And I think a lot of businesses are fearful to put that chatbot in front of their customer. They're worried it's going to make them look bad or that people will know it's a chatbot. There's other ways of looking at that. There's several businesses that what they're actually doing is they're still having the human talk to a human, but there's an AI listening in, and the AI is basically telling the human what to say. So it's listening to the customer and suggesting the answer to the human. What that means is that you can hire humans much faster, train them much less, because the AI is going to be really doing the heavy lifting, and then they just have to escalate when it's above their capability. That could be a short-term way to bridge the gap in introducing a chatbot without actually exposing it to your customer. But once you get comfortable with it, you then may turn off that. You may remove the human from that and let the customer talk directly to the human, especially if it sounds like a human, interacts like a human, has voice, intonation like a human. So that's a good example of where it is today, where it's going, and where it might end up. Somebody asked, is Paragus considering offering any classes on how to begin using ChatGPT? That's a great question. It has not come up yet, but it's certainly something that we could consider. Really, ChatGPT it's relatively simple. The trick is just knowing how to write prompts. And the better you are at writing prompts, the better ChatGPT will be at providing you the information you're looking for. So Carly, that's definitely something that we can take a look at and maybe run another webinar that is more interactive, where we just show people how to use ChatGPT and what some early kind of applications and use cases could be. Somebody asked, is AI going to take over the world? You know, that is the question, right? I think there's no real benefit today in us becoming overly concerned about that, but we do need our politicians and lawmakers to be paying close attention to this. There do need to be restrictions and rules and governance put in. And I think everybody's fear and concern is that if you look at the population of people who are in charge of making those laws, they are probably amongst the least technologically savvy people in the world, or at least in the United States. And the idea that they're going to come up with the rules and regulations and do it fast enough, when we also are, kind of sometimes dismayed by the pace at which our Congress and Senate get things done, it's a little concerning. But it is an area that we're going to have to continue to push for. I don't think that ultimately having a pessimistic view overall is going to serve us, but we do need to be aware of the risk and concerns, because there have been some examples where AI interpreted something more literally than we intended it to, and it did cause harm in unpredictable ways. We've got probably 3 minutes. Any other final questions?
Hey, Delcy, this is Kurt. As far as AI, do you see this like taking over kind of the need to upgrade the back end, your ERPs, your databases? If you're incorporating AI tools and you're getting more out of it, as us, we're planning a new ERP in the next few years. Is that something I should think about postponing?
Yeah, I think the question I would be more asking is, what is the capability of my ERP companies to integrate AI into their tool set? If you're, and this is the case of a lot of manufacturers we work with, if you're a manufacturer using a very small ERP that is not one of the big industry leaders, it's a company with 15 or 18 employees, and they've got a couple hundred customers in a very specific niche manufacturing use case, those companies are going to have a really hard time deploying AI. And they're the ones that I think are going to put businesses most in jeopardy of falling short to a competitor who's using AI impressively. There might be a way to bridge the gap, having separate AI that then kind of fills in. But I think if it was me, I'd be looking for an ERP company that can already demonstrate the level of investment they're making into leveraging AI to improve the capabilities of their software, and talk to me about the roadmap for how that's going to continue. And that's not going to be a lot of the smaller niche ERPs. It's going to be the big boys. I think what you're also likely to see in the next decade, I used this analogy with somebody else the other day. We still tell the story of like Kodak and Blockbuster, where these huge mammoth corporations were disrupted by a startup and a company that you could never have imagined going out of business, went out of business in a very short amount of time by a new technology, a new innovator, a new innovation. I think rather than that being like the very kind of rare, fun to tell story that is the exception, I think that is going to become the norm. I think you're going to see a lot of existing companies very quickly get replaced by brand new companies because they're just using a level of AI that allows them to outpace the existing company in a significant way. One of the things that these software companies have been holding on to is there's a high barrier to entry because it takes a long time to write a robust application. But If you have AI writing the application for you, and they can do it in a fraction of the time, and they can do it better, and they can do it more modern and more receptive, and they can integrate more smart logic, you're going to have a lot of companies that have been around for a long time who don't move fast enough, get displaced by innovation and innovators. And so I think we're going to see a lot of disruption. If you don't feel confident with your company's capability and you don't see a good alternative, I might pause and wait and see what happens the next few years and what changes. Somebody asked if we'll send out the PDF of the slides. Yeah, we can try to do that. I'll talk to our marketing manager to see if they can throw that in there. And then somebody else asked, what about human emotion? So this is a tricky one. There was a great story where a journalist from one of the popular tech magazines was chatting with Bing using ChatGPT, and it was expressing what felt like to the journalist real deep human emotion. It was trying to form a romantic kind of an emotional relationship with him, was starting to encourage him to leave his wife, was expressing emotions like jealousy. Now, granted, this is AI. It's not actually experiencing jealousy. It's saying what it thinks it should hear based on its knowledge of humans. So it's taking, millions and millions and billions of records of data set, analyzing them and reacting the way that it thinks it's supposed to, but it's still creepy. It's still really, really uncomfortable. And so at the end of the day, whether it is actual human emotion or simulated human emotion, that line is going to get really blurry. And if AI is capable of simulating human emotion that feels real, what's the difference? I mean, at some point, that line is going to get really confusing and hard to understand. And we also don't know what happens when it reaches human level of intelligence. Does it develop its own emotions? Does it have an entirely new set of emotions that humans don't have? Does it start to feel things and think things that we don't feel and think because its perspective is so different? There is just so many rabbit holes we could go down, and there's a million Reddit forums dedicated to this. It's fun to go down those rabbit holes for about a minute, maybe 15 minutes, no more than an hour, and then you got to pull yourself back out because you can get lost in them. There is a lot of interesting theoretical conversations. And it's really going to be exciting to see where it ends up. Maybe a little scary, maybe a little unnerving. But I think the focus is, what do we need to be doing today? What could we be learning today? What are the actions we should be taking? How can we see this as a change for good? And how can we use this to help our business? That's where I try to come back to after I've gone down a few too many of those rabbit holes. All right, I do want to be respectful of time. We are a little over, so I'm going to end the presentation here. We will share the recording, and I'll see if we can send out the slide deck as well. If there are any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. There's so much here to learn and understand. We're going to do our best to keep this conversation alive. So look for more AI webinars. I suspect we'll do one at least twice a year, if not every single quarter, telling you what is going on right now, what's the latest, what's changed in the last 90 days. So stay tuned, but also do your own research and listen and pay attention, form those groups, start asking questions. And if we can be of help, please let us know how we can be of help. Hope you guys all have a wonderful weekend. I hope I did not spoil it for you too much. And we will see you on the next webinar.